Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on quality educations. And World Talent Economy Forum major focus on quality educations. And we have our world famous speaker, Professor Edward, Professor Mr. Marshalls, and Professor Rob. I want to give chance Professor Edward.
Hi, well, thank you. The World Talent Economic Forum, of course, the word talent is right in there. And what that implies, quite correctly, is that education is the most important thing. I like to say that the human mind is the source of all value. There's no such thing, for example, as a natural resource. If somebody in the American state of Texas 150 years ago owned a piece of land and there was oil seeping out of it, well, it would have been worthless land. You can't, put crops and farm on a piece of land with this gooey liquid coming out. It was only the human mind that figured out how to take that oil, make it into fuel to run machines. The point is, the human mind is really the source of all value, certainly all economic and technological value. Knowledge, it makes things of value. So this is the absolute top most important thing we can talk about. Everything else we talk about on these shows comes from that premise. But then let's talk about education and quality education. Now, in the modern world, starting a couple hundred years ago, the model starting in Europe and Britain and France and some of the other European countries was to take the Industrial Revolution model and use it in education. That is mass production. The folks in those countries, the leaders in those countries, understood how important education is, and they understood how important it was to have the wider populace educated, at least to a certain level, because not only is it good for economics, it's good for human value. Educated people tend to be happier people, better people. They can run their lives better. But the model back then was mass production. In other words, and that's what we still have in much of our country in the United States and elsewhere today. In other words, at 9 o'clock, the kids are in a particular room and they get math poured into their heads. And then they go down the assembly line, and at 10 o'clock, they get history poured into their heads. And then they go down the assembly line and so forth. And that was kind of the model that has been very successful in educating the masses of people over the last couple of centuries, but it's not optimal. For example, I've got a nice sweater here I'm going to hold up for everybody. See that? Isn't that a nice sweater? It's got a picture of Cicero on it, one of my heroes, Marcus Tullius Cicero. I'm not going to quote Latin to you. Now, what if I said, everybody in Malaysia and everyone in the Asian Pacific area is going to get this sweater. This is going to be their clothing. And you might say, well, Ed, that's very nice, but first of all, it's not my size. It might not be your size. It's a little big for me, frankly. Not my color. It's not my style. In a warm climate, this is a very heavy sweater. It's nice if you're in a cool climate, but it's not very good. What is my point about this? If I said everyone should have this sweater, you would object. One size fits all doesn't work. One size fits all in education doesn't work, okay? Because we learn as individuals. So today, in a technological society, we not only face the problems that we've had in the past with one size fits all education, but it's even more important. In the United States, for example, we have a big disconnect between the schooling system, which tends to be government dominated, and the needs of businesses, the needs of entrepreneurs, and the like. Before COVID, there were 1.6 million more job openings in the United States than there were unemployed people, meaning everyone should have been employed. The problem was the disconnect between the needs of businesses and the schooling system. And this gets into a couple of issues. First of all is what do schools teach? And what they should be teaching, in addition to just pouring knowledge into head, they should be teaching about how to think, how to solve problems. If I look at I look at the curriculum in my own schools right here, and a lot of it is, again, the one size fits all. Well, does every junior high school or middle school student and high school student really need to learn Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, and maybe beginning calculus? The answer is no. It would be much better if they, for example, learned how to balance a checkbook, if they learned statistics, because so many people can lie with statistics. Many people don't understand what statistics mean. The curriculum, even in some of the best schools in the United States, are not very good. Um, there have been a lot of different ways of teaching that have proven to be better. For example, the Montessori method of teaching, which has been around for 100 some years, it really focuses on individual students. There's an approach that, associated with the Montessori method, the Socratic method. This is a book by one of my trustees, Michael Strong, who runs a school in Texas and a system of schools. And it teaches how to think. He works with small children and not just saying, okay, everybody read the book and read about history or do the math problem. He teaches how to think. He asks questions. He listens to their responses. Then he asks other things. And this is not just Michael, okay? This is other people. This is a very good technique. And yet I don't see it in the schools where my kids are going. I don't see it in a lot of schools in the United States. So part of it is what we teach and how we teach. But I want to mention a couple of things. The challenge in the future is going to be that we have a fast changing economy because we have fast changing exponential technology. How do we robot proof our education system? And I would say there are 2 or 3 principles. First, and most important, is choice. Right now, we have a system in the United States, and I know in a lot of other countries we have the same system, is that if I live right where I live now, my kids have to go to the following schools. They don't have a choice, unless I'm rich enough to basically send them to a private school, which I'm not. One of the things that's happening in the United States now is the school choice movement has been growing, meaning the money that's allocated by the government for each student can be used by the parent wherever they want. So you start having school choice. So just as the people who produce smartphones have to basically bid for my business, you would have the same thing in education. And we're seeing that in the United States. Second is some sort of growing partnership with businesses and other entrepreneurs, which sounds like something that Sharif is doing through his efforts. In other words, in Switzerland, 70% of kids go through an apprenticeship program. It's a learn and earn program. It's like a job tryout when they're in high school. They might spend half of their time in class and half of their time at a pharmaceutical company, a finance company, a tech company. They have 200 or more categories. And so, first of all, they get to try out, well, do I like this? Do I like that? Let's see. The businesses also will sometimes sponsor and pay for the kids' college education if they need college, because they want the student to come back and work for them after college. And so instead of having mountains of debt from going to college, you actually get your college paid for. And of course, you learn real work skills. And you basically learn that if you want to earn, you have to be productive. So that's one of the reforms that we see that works very well in Switzerland and is starting to catch on more in the United States. Another example of education reform is so-called lifelong learning. Because technology moves so fastly, having just-in-time talent is going to be just as important as having just-in-time inventory for production. And so, for example, one reform that's been around for several decades is for individuals to be able to subscribe to lifelong learning programs. In this country, we have a system where the government takes a certain amount out of your paycheck for unemployment insurance. And then if you lose your job, you get a little bit of money each week for a certain period of time while you look for a new job. Well, one of the reforms that people like me were promoting like 20 years ago was, why not allow some of that money to go into an account where you can subscribe to lifelong learning? So if it looks like your job might be eliminated, if it looks like you have to retrain, you can do that. You can have a way to pay for that. That's another kind of innovation that you might see. And I'll mention finally, and this kind of relates again to the discussion about partnering with businesses and industry. I want to plug another book here, if I can, Value Creation Principles by Bartley Madden. He's just set up a center in Florida. I'm about to go on a call with this center in Florida about the importance of looking at how businesses operate and how value creation using knowledge and allowing knowledge among employees to grow is really that important. But this involves partnering with and understanding what the education system provides. I think I've mentioned in prior talks that when I was doing public policy 30 some years ago, I would talk to business people. I'd say, what's your biggest challenge? I was expecting they would say taxes are too high, which they were, or this regulation or that regulation just doesn't work. But a lot of them said, we just can't get the talent. What used to be, a good high school education, now you have to get it from a college or a university. That's why world talent is so important. And again, I think the answer in the future to getting the best quality education is to allow a market for education, just like we have a market for everything else, to have a Steve Jobs of education or a bunch of them trying to offer different things for paying customers. More and more in the United States, you don't have to have a college degree to get a good job. In fact, a lot of the big tech companies say, if you just get the training and some sort of certification, we'll hire you. And so that's going to be the trend of the future. The trend of the future is not going to be for more big, massive universities that waste money. It's going to be for targeted learning, targeted training. And that's what you're going to see in the future. And I think it's going to be good for everybody because you're going to have real value creation. And again, thanks for this great show. I've got to go talk to another university right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Edward, for your contribution. Mr. Marshall.
Well, thank you, Sharif, and thank you, Edward, for laying out your vision of education. I think it's very relevant to what's going on in the world. The approach that we're following together with Sharif in the World Talent Economy Forum is based on the 17 Sustainability Development Goals created by the UN. The overarching concept of these 17 development goals are that they address the climate crisis and climate change. Goal number 4 is quality education. And quality education is really important. Since 2009, there have been enormous progress in achieving the target of universal primary education. The total enrollment rate in developing regions, which is what our focus is on, not the United States, as Ed kind of focused on, reached 91% in 2015. And the worldwide number of children out of school has dropped by almost half. That's a significant goal that is going, not good enough yet, but we're on our way. There's also been a dramatic increase in literacy rates. Obviously, it's important to know math, and it's important to know your history and things like that, but literacy is really critical in the developing world. The more people that are literate, the better opportunities we have to inform people, and they can make value judgments not based upon some third party or some other country, but upon their own sense of judgment. There has also been a dramatic increase in literacy rates, and many more girls are in school than ever before. And I think everybody who's following the World Talent Economy Forum knows that Sharif and his team are training 100, I believe it's 100 women in Rwanda, and we're targeting 1,800 women in India, and we're looking to do more. These are all the remarkable successes that have occurred. And we believe that the World Talent Economy Forum is at the forefront of this and needs to continue to progress in that fashion. Progress has also been tough in some developing regions due to high levels of poverty, which is one of the reductions of the sustainability goals, is to reduce poverty. Armed conflicts and other emergencies. We see what's going on in Africa, a lot of armed conflicts, and let alone what we're seeing in the Ukraine. In Western Asia and Northern Africa, for example, ongoing armed conflict has seen an increase in the number of children out of school. That affects literacy. That affects education. We need to reduce the armed conflict and therefore put more children back in school, or as we've seen in parts of India, where 40% of India is off the grid, no electricity. And what they're doing is women and children go around gathering fuel for fires so they can cook and have light at night. And instead of being educated, that's what their job is doing. And they have no knowledge of what other than scavenging for materials. So this is a worrying trend. While sub-Saharan Africa made the greatest progress in primary school enrollment among all developing regions, from 52% in 1990 up to 78% in 2012, large disparities still remain. Children from the poorest households are up to 4 times more likely to be out of school than those in the richest households. Disparities between rural and urban areas also remain high. Achieving inclusive and quality education for all reaffirms the belief that education is one of the most powerful and proven vehicles for sustainable development. This goal ensures that all girls and boys complete free primary and secondary schooling by 2030. That's our goal. Can we achieve it? It's a tough goal to match, but we're going to make sure that we fund it and get the money there. And we want to do this, obviously, through the World Talent Economy Forum. It also aims to provide equal access to affordable vocational training. I noticed that Ed did talk about the trend in the United States going more towards a vocational training component. Vocational training has been around in Europe for a long time. Many German citizens are not necessarily have PhDs or MBAs or master's degrees. Many of them do, but a lot of them are vocationally trained. And we've seen that also establish itself throughout the developing world. And we want to see more of that because vocational training, like Ed said, not just for the United States, but for the developing world, gives powerful infrastructure lift to the world. The other thing I want to mention in this sustainability development goal of number 5 of education is that it has to be allocated based upon cultural norms. You just can't take U.S. norms and apply them to people in Rwanda or in Malaysia or in India. You have to understand that you are in a culture. There are cultural values. You don't want to step on them. You don't want to create the opposite of what you're trying to do. So cultural norms have to be taken into consideration, but we still remember that the cultural norms also include for lifting people out of poverty. How do you do that? By education. How do you get education? Reducing armed conflict, reducing emergencies. How do you do that? By making sure that people have a voice and that they, no matter what culture they're in, they have a voice and they can sustain a democratic approach. Achieving inclusive and quality education for all reaffirms the belief that education is one of the most powerful and proven vehicles for sustainable development. This goal ensures that all girls and boys complete free primary and secondary schooling, as I said before, by 2030. It also aims to provide equal access to, as I said before, vocational training, to eliminate gender and wealth disparities and achieve universal access to quality higher education. As much as Ed talked about the fact that in the United States, they're allocating this concept that you can vote market-wise for where you want to get educated. That's important. But in the developing world, we need fundamental education, basic education that gets literacy and concepts around so that they can be vocationally trained, be able to read and write so that they can do what they have to do to make a difference in their community, in their culture, and lift the value of the livelihoods of those people to a new level. And thank you, Sharif, for having me on your conference.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Professor Rob, what do you want to add for today's discussion?
Well, the topic is quality education. And the term quality is an interesting one to explore. My first interaction with the concept on a deep basis was reading the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance back when I was in high school. And that book takes you through, uses a construct of a father and son going on a motorcycle trip to talk about the various aspects of quality and how quality is a very subjective measure of effectiveness. We look at quality very differently. For instance, if we were to go back at the beginning of the last century and pick up a high quality product and compared it to a high quality product in this century, they'd be black and white different. The high quality product this century would be electronic, would beat very high standards, and it would pretty much work. On the other hand, if you move up to the 1950s and 1960s and you look at an appliance, appliances at that time lasted decades and we look at appliance today, and we're looking at appliance last year's. Once again, two high quality items are perceived very differently in the periods of time that they're in. And education is kind of that way. There's an interesting, and I'll post the link in the chat, article in, what's it called? Intrinsic Perspective. And it's titled Why We Stopped Making Einsteins. And it advocates for a concept called aristocratically tutored. And it goes back and looks at some of the smartest people that have existed in the past and looks at an overall trend for geniuses, which is in decline. And it argues that the reason that the trend is in decline is that we don't have the focus on tutoring we once did. And they argue that the tutoring they're talking about is not where you meet somebody in a coffee shop and they're going to tutor you on calculus. The tutoring they're talking about is how they used to do it in rich families, where they would assign you a tutor, and that tutor would take you through the lesson material, but explain to you what it meant, how it could be applied, how it could change your life. Now, fortunately, when I was also back in high school, I was given a tutor very much like this for a summer. A professor was assigned to me, and every day that professor would take me out and show me a different aspect of life, and gave me a sense for what I could do in the future, what kinds of jobs might be interesting, and what the penalties were for not having an education. What's also kind of interesting about this paper is it looks at the success rate of students that come out of a variety of schools, whether it be Harvard or a city college or university, and it found really no difference, except as it applied to the aptitudes of the students as they came into the education system. So if they were high aptitude students entering the system, they were high aptitude students when they came out. If they were low aptitude students as they came into the system, they were low aptitude students as they came out. Their fundamental capabilities weren't changed much by the educational institution. And the screwy thing is, because schools by their very nature tend to be focused on providing a piece of paper that certifies that you completed the educational material, as opposed to being measured on how well you're able to apply those learnings to the jobs you subsequently have, then schools themselves simply become a self-serving institution, and they're not serving the global good. They're not producing students that can, with a degree, immediately jump into the workforce and be productive. There was an old, not a very funny joke back when I was looking at law schools, is that when you come out of law school, you don't know how to practice law. What you do is you learn how to look up things, but you have no idea how to practice the thing you just got a degree in. And that's very common in education. You come out with a degree in marketing, you probably can't do a senior level marketing job. It's going to take a few years doing marketing to understand marketing. And I honestly had never really figured out why you even need a degree in communications, since the skills you need in communications largely have to do with interacting with others. And if you were good and highly social in high school, you probably came out of high school with that set of skills. The specific tasks you have to do in a communications job largely are tied to the company's policy, and so an education on that particular company would probably do you a lot more good than a generic education in communications. Now, I will say this with regard to degrees: there is, if you are going to work for a company that values degrees from Harvard, a degree from Harvard is going to do you a lot of good, but it's very cliquish. It's Harvard guys supporting other Harvard guys, or Stanford guys supporting other Stanford guys. It really isn't talking about your underlying capability. It's talking about your relationships. And so the value in the degree coming from a top tier Ivy League school is often the relationships that you make, and the connection that you have with other people that have had a degree from that school previously. So there is a value, but it has nothing to do with the material. And so going back to this idea of aristocratic tutoring, there is a potential now to take artificial intelligence the underlying concept, and as we work into conversational computers and scale aristocratic tutors, but make them electronic. The advantage being right now in school, pretty much at any levels, teachers tend to be underpaid, and the facility tends to be understaffed. The way to get around that is find a way to ramp up coverage of students and provide them with the focus and tutoring requirements they need at scale. And we will shortly be able to do that with digital resources. Today, there are programs out there that allow and provide for executives to tutor and help students as they go through the process. And clearly we have intern programs as well that can help people learn about how to apply what they're learning as they are learning their underlying skills. And these are also very important, but should be integrated within the educational institution so that you have not just book learning against an arbitrary goal of a degree, but where the education is tied to actual practices and the student can apply what they've learned in many cases during the time they're learning it. So rather than chasing a degree or doing the Tiger Mom thing where you're focusing on just the grades and accomplishing the tests, and tests and the degree are the goal, the underlying goal is a successful career and hopefully work-life balance. Because one of the areas that educational institutions do not cover adequately is work-life balance. Coming out of school with even basic knowledge of how to budget, how to save for retirement, how to maintain an apartment or a home, what to do with regard to relationships. Those are things you aren't taught formally. Those are things you were supposed to be picked up from your parents. And if you're like if you have parents like most parents today, both parents are probably working and don't really have the time to spend with the child to help them develop those kinds of skills and capabilities. And so the education institution has to step in. So fundamentally, I believe the education as we currently have it is broken. It's decoupled almost entirely from the work that a person's going to be doing. It does not address the critical need for work-life balance. And I believe the increase in mental health issues is to a large, particularly in schools, is to a large extent because we are not providing that balance to the students in schools. And so they're not coming out with the balance once their education is finished. And some geographies like China has been so bad that they've had huge spikes in suicides as a result of, I believe, that lack of teaching balance and the lack of employers at scale of assuring the mental health of their employees, and of the employees looking for that mental health focus as a reason to select a particular company over another or a particular job class over another. And in the end, we can do an awful lot of good if we just help young students understand the kinds of things that they enjoy, so they can focus on a career path that they'll love. And we don't have the situation we have now where so many people live for the weekend. They're miserable during the week. They live for the weekend, and the end result is much of their life is miserable, and it doesn't have to be. One of the guys I grew up with, the father of my best friend growing up, Mike Boyjan, passed now, but he won and lost several fortunes over his life, and it never seemed to get him down. His overall experience was if you're not enjoying what you're doing, don't do it. The money isn't important. It's the quality of life that's important. And this takes us back full circle to quality education. I think quality education should fundamentally teach you to have a high quality life. And that's where it fundamentally fails at this particular point in time. And fixing that will not be easy, but it is critical to our future because we really are losing a significant amount of talent these days to miseducation, to a lack of work-life balance, and just people coming out of the educational institutions just completely unable to live in the real world or even know how to fix their lives, let alone how to have a good one.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what you want to add?
Well, such an excellent topic for today. And so many good points being made. I I almost want to go back and tag on to half a dozen of Rob's points. Let me start with some basic ones and come back on. One of the big missing elements that really COVID highlighted is a key part of a quality education was social emotional learning. And the biggest casualty of COVID is not just in education, but in all parts of life, the social emotional learning that is so important for us to be functional human beings. And that's something that as we look and redefine education post-COVID, that really needs to come back into place and be able to do that. The second thing I'd like to touch on is Rob and others said education is broken. I 1,000% agree. I get myself in trouble all the time when I'm in universities, particularly that says education hasn't changed since the time of Socrates. We still use the same type of approach and the same basic terminology, even though the world we live in now is so much more complex and so much more challenging, but in some ways it's also simpler too. We heard Edward and Marshall and Rob all come back and talk about the concept of lifelong learning. I think this is so important because as we look at what we're doing, even the way our life is structured today has changed to be built around the concept of lifelong learning. In the past, the style was that you went to school, you worked, and then you retired. Oftentimes you worked for the same job, same company. And then we went into more of a cyclical approach where you learned, you worked, you learned again, you worked, you learned again, and you worked, and then you retired. And you maybe mixed in there some short mini retirements along the way. But where we have changed with the way we are learning right now is we've gone into a time of blended learning where we will learn, work, and play kind of all together and at the same time. For example, in my company, most of my technical staff will take programming courses and things in the evening online, or they will take a marketing class online as they go through that too. The statistic, if you go back and look at some of the studies, is in most university classes, what you learn as a freshman has some significant changes by the time you're a senior in science and technology in areas like that. And really the half-life of our technical knowledge is getting shorter and shorter all the time. So the need to stay up to date is never been so intense as it is right now. And I'm attending South by Southwest last week and this week. And it actually looks like South by Southwest is going to have a little bit over 200,000 people attend it this year. But in many of the courses, many of the workshops and the panels, some of the things we're hearing is that even the concept of higher education is broken today and really needs to come back and be examined. I can tell you personally, for my software developers, I no longer require a college degree. And what I'm looking at is how they are using their time to learn their skill, but even more importantly, stay up to date on their skill. And in the other groups I'm part of, looking around with management in the VC community and others like that, that has become a very common acceptance there, is that the university as we know it today has changed and their role has changed, and even the methodologies they're using needs to change. Now, there's one place I take a little exception with Rob, and I can see the smile on his face as I start this one. My undergraduate degree, it was in radio, television, film, and communications. And I would tell you, though, some of the concepts I learned in communications have served me so well as I look what to do in management, as I look at how to work with other people, how to go back and shape the future of organizations. Because the future of organizations, and actually the future of our planet, is not the tools we use, not the technology. It's what people do with them. And it's how people work with other people to accomplish it. And that is one of the things that I think education needs to spend more time focusing on. When I used to teach at the university level, I would try to have at least one project in my courses every semester that required the students to work with students at another university or two. Because just like we're doing today on this program, so much of what we do today is communicating at a distance and not with people sitting next to us. So that type of skill is really necessary for quality education to teach today. Most of us just, when we got out of school, we had to learn to do this ad hoc and on our own. And quite honestly, most of the Zoom calls and things I'm on are not very good because we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to apply the elements. Last thing is that education today cannot be done in isolation. In the past, we tended to think education was an isolated experience. So when I was an executive at the MCC Consortia, which was designed to help the United States recover the computer industry against the Japanese fifth generation computer project. As we stood up that consortia with the member companies, everything, we worked with the research universities and others around Central Texas to put in place the required programs to support a very advanced research and development operation in the areas of MCC. So in areas like AI, areas like advanced architecture, others like that, necessary. I was an executive at the Cimatech Consortia, and I was on the stand-up team, actually, of both of those. When we founded Cimatech, we worked with the research universities, but then because we had technicians and others in the semiconductor industry, we worked with the community colleges to put in place technician training programs. We worked with others in the supply chain to help put training in place that was important for the supply chain. Well, that's not the way education was done before that. It was not industry working with the education institutions to say, here's my pain points. Here's the critical skills I need. Here's the other things. Well, since MCC and Cimatech, as we look today, we're now working with boot camps. We're working with coding schools. We're working with different type of education accelerators and to begin to do it. So just like when we look at entrepreneurship, we have accelerators to help advance early stage companies. We need the same thing on the education side to help us advance humans in learning what they can in an accelerated manner. Finally, one of the things I would really like us to go back and do more from the big earlier times is expand the use of mentorship, just expand the use of apprenticeships. You know, one of the best things, if I go back to ancient Greek, is you saw very much the use of both of those in the way the Greeks advanced their education system, their quality education system. You know, you had the Agora marketplace there, where you had artisans and technicians coming together to mentor others. You had apprenticeships, you had people working together. I would not be where I am today without three of my mentors, George Kosmetsky, Admiral Bobby Inman, and Bob Noyce. All what was interesting is two of those won the President's Award for Technology in the United States and others. But they taught me things I could never learn in a college class. They taught me things that would be hard to do just because of their thought processes and teaching thought process and how to respond to situations. So, in summary on this, it's all an ecosystem. It's totally an ecosystem that has to be applied to have a quality education. And lifelong learning, not necessarily at a university, but lifelong learning is a very critical part of this. And as our life expectancy continues to expand, we will change and have more and more careers during our lifetime. And it's never more important to instill the concept that learning is a continuous process, not discrete processes that we have to go through. So Sharif, thank you so much for letting me be part of this today.
Thank you, Professor David Smith, and thank you, Dr. Talib Rafael, for joining today's session. Today we are discussing about quality educations. First, I want to give chance, Professor David Kelly. What you want to add for quality education?
Well, that is a huge topic for me. I mean, what I want to add, there's just I could go on for hours. I think, in my life, it's gotten to the point the past 15, 20 years, I just don't hire kids out of college anymore. I just can't do it. I can't afford it. With two exceptions, in the past 20 years, I've hired two kids out of college, or one was still in college. And in both cases, it was because of such exceptional talent that they went out of their way. One kid had ripped out the inside of his car and turned it into a bunch of touch displays and wrote all the software himself and it was like sitting in a starship that he built, and he wrote everything and it was working. And so I hired him. He never finished college, but now he's a top engineer at Microsoft. He still gets upset when I call him Devin the intern, but and he's absolutely brilliant engineer. But it just, what they teach in college is just almost irrelevant. I mean, I complained for so long about that. That's how I ended up as a professor. Was, I guess I was complaining so often about the poor skills and knowledge that I volunteered to teach a class each semester, and I did that for a while. But I turned out that the curriculum they wanted to use, and so I ended up teaching database theory at BYU for a while, and the curriculum, they wouldn't even let me change the curriculum, and I got in trouble with the department head because I told the students, look, if you do any of the stuff in our class the way we're showing in this class, in the real life, I would fire you. And I would tell them why and what those other skills are and the different approaches. But the schools are so allergic to the current technologies or the proprietary technologies, the ones that are actually useful. And then they teach outmoded concepts that, we finished like 20 years ago. And it just is mind numbing. And I ended up quitting teaching for the last year or so, just because I can't handle it. I can't handle teaching the curriculum they require me to teach these kids, because it's so just backwards. and then I'm told, oh well, the reason kids are struggling is because this is a class for weeding kids out. Database theory is so freaking easy. I could teach my 5-year-old database theory. You shouldn't be trying to scare kids away. Not with this. It's just you. I mean, to pass the classes I had to teach, you had to. It was like taking 3 5-credit classes all at the same time, because you've got to master setting up these weird VPN or VMs with these databases that no one uses. I mean, they're not even using like Postgres or something. I mean, what the department head wanted me to use is I mean, it really hurt me to have to even teach this stuff. And the fact that we've let education degrade to the point of uselessness, at least in my field, in software engineering, is just mind-numbing. Now, stepping out of my little box a little bit, my wife actually is a teacher by training, as well as a clinical therapist, and she works as a SPED teacher and curriculum developer, this sort of stuff, in the local school district. And she didn't grow up in the United States. And I'm seeing this comment in this private chat inside, and I absolutely agree. That's a good plan. But so my wife struggles with trying to get kids interested and engaged, and she does a lot of social and emotional learning. In fact, she specializes in that kind of stuff. But the problem is they don't teach it anything like that to kids unless they've already pretty much screwed up their whole educational career at the local school district. And it just, I know it bothers her to no end. Some of the requirements of the People's Republic of Washington State here, the kinds of requirements that are just out of touch with reality, and it's so fraught with different educational agendas that are more about teaching political points of view than actually educational skills that are needed to get into a life, kind of this lifelong learning cycle that you have to be in. And that's another thing, getting back to my tiny little box, is you can't even do jobs in software engineering anymore unless you're willing to relearn all of your skills every 3 years. I've been programming for 36 years, and I've had to learn 15 different programming languages over the course of my career. And I only use like 5 or 6 or 7 nowadays, but it's even the ones like, let's pick one, like JavaScript, right? Half the time they don't even really teach that in school, even though that's been predominant the past decade and a half, but over that time span, the way you approach JavaScript, the tools, and it's not so much that the fundamental language has changed, but the framework in which you do it is completely different. Completely. And they don't even hardly teach the language. And mostly the language is what you learned as programming JavaScript, 15 years ago, is completely different than how they program JavaScript now. and some of the weird tricks of the language that they've used in some of these newer approaches to JavaScript. If you put the source code next to each other, it almost looks like a different programming language. And they you really have to pay attention. I mean, for you to recognize it as JavaScript, you would have had to have been the most uber expert in the world 15 years ago to know these little idiosyncrasies of the language that they take advantage of nowadays that just weren't even used 15 years ago. And the fact that the colleges are teaching, first of all, they're allergic to anything proprietary, or in other words, anything that people actually use, and they tend to teach things that are, in these little boxes from 10 years ago that are just, I forgot who said it, but the person about internships, the people I find that I'm willing to hire, I don't care about their education. I want to see, do they love it, and what have they actually written? And if they love it and they do it for fun, I mean, you're practically hired. You come into my office and you whip out your shiny new degree and your certifications, you've lost the job right before it's even started. Because frankly, I don't care about any of that. It's about, what have you done? Show me, and maybe what's your learning cycle, and how do you approach your career? I'm sorry, I'm getting up on my soapbox that this is like a really personal, deeply personal issue for me. And I know I've skipped over things because my brain is just exploding all over this topic. But I think that's pretty much sums up my position on the topic. Yeah, I think so.
Thank you, David J. Kelly. This is reality. Even I am almost 14 years in academy. You are 100% correct. That's why personally I developed World Talent Economy Forum, School of Talent Economy, because I'm very honest with you. Even in Asia, I'm really sorry with these universities. Even I don't know how they develop the university ranking, this and that. Even I know that what they are doing, especially it's not correct. That's why we are developing this platform. Yeah.
One other thing I totally forgot is thinking skills. They're not even teaching thinking skills. And what I mean by that is it's not just the universities, like society in general. The way kids are multitasking and the way kids are switching between tasks, from thing to thing to thing, is like terrible for software engineering. I need someone that can autistically stare at a screen for fun with 10,000 lines of algebra for 10 hours straight, and because they love it and it's so fun that they forget about, bodily needs, food, stuff like that. That's the kind of person that we need to really move the field forward. And more we get these, not do they just not have the regular skills, but they can't even think through problems that are what we need to do to move the field forward. And so less and less, I mean, that's when I started programming, there was age discrimination, like really old guys, you're out. Now it's like the other way around. Unless you're like an old guy and an Uber expert, I don't want to talk to you. And it's not just me. It's like industry wide. If you're a really gifted engineer and you're old, you've like almost automatically got the job. You just, it's amazing, this age reversal in terms of discrimination that's just like completely flipped over the past several decades. Okay, now I'm done.
No, excellent. Exactly, Dr. David J. Kelly. what you are discussing, we believe in that. That's why we develop this educational content, because all of your expertise, all of your industrial knowledge is very important, and we are trying to do so. And I believe already many students from Asia Pacific. Let's say next week we have a special episode on Water Day. In India, we provide training 3,200 students, and we share all of our content with our Indian Rotary Club partners. So this is the things actually. I believe still we have to go a long way, especially if we can solve at least one problem in education. Maybe we can help many people in developing world. Dr. Talib Rafael, you actually like represent many big organizations, and they have a lot of social commitment. You also have a very good social commitment, and what you want to add for quality educations, and what is your view? Dr. Talib, I cannot hear you.
You're not. You're no sound. You're not muted in the system, but it looks like your microphone's not active. And he's frozen.
I think he's trying to join again. Sorry. He tried to join again, because if he join again, maybe his problem will be solved.
We can only hope.
Yes, but he will, because he. Okay. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
There you
Good,
are.
good, good. I just want to say what David said is absolutely correct. Our educational system is all left behind. It's behind not just 10, 15 years. It's behind 40, 50 years. They're still teaching the people with the same tools, the same mentality, the same concept that we have been doing for the last half century. I think that education now is not just about getting a job, which is what people are trying to get at, because jobs are very important in people's lives. But education is about enlarging your mind. I think technology has revolutionized education, but education is not up to its level of being responsive to all of this at all. Today, for example, the concept of blockchain, the concept of cryptocurrency, all these concepts are new concepts that are not more than 10, 15 years old. Yet, no educational system is adopting them. Educational systems, as David said, are very, very reactionary. They're laying behind. I'm sorry to say this, but they are. I think you all agree with me on this one, but David's articulated it in a very good way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Talib. Even people like you, they can help a lot. Like, we are very small organization, but we are trying to help the youth community. Even what
You're doing a lot. You're
Talib
doing a
said.
lot.
No, I'm
Doing
just
a lot,
trying to
Sharif.
help.
No,
Yes.
you're doing a lot, Sharif.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So that is the things actually we want to help the developing nations people. There are many talented people in developing nations, only because of lack of proper educations and lack of proper support. I believe like many people actually distract, and many people
The
actually
model,
cannot
the
get.
model, the model, Sharif, is the model of the first world university and education. Everybody's following them, unfortunately, and they need to look at themselves again and see, are they up to the challenges of the new technology or not. I think that's what David was trying to say. Thank
Yeah, exactly. Very practical knowledge,
you. Yeah,
industry-based knowledge. This is important.
yeah,
We completely agree with all of you, and definitely that is the way we can solve this problem. We are trying to engage more people. If you want to engage with our School of Talent Economy, you can take class, and you can engage with our youth community in Asia Pacific, because we are fully focused on developing nations in Asia Pacific. I want to share even good news. Example, in Malaysia, Malaysia is a Muslim country. They have more than 6,000 mosques, almost 3,000 mosques. They are actually collaborate with World Talent Economy Forum because they also believe that this kind of knowledge, what we are sharing, what we are producing through World Talent Economy Forum, this is extremely valuable for their ecosystem development. uh, Religious education is important, they believe, but side by side they want to learn modern science, engineering, and technology. So from our speakers, those who want to join our School of Talent Economy initiative and our research initiative, they can join and they can support us, and I believe you will enjoy our project. So thank you for joining.
You can count me in, definitely.
Thank you,
Definitely.
thank you, thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir.
I just
Thank
want to
you,
add
sir.
something, if I may, just quickly.
Yes, yes.
The COVID thing also was a helpful opportunity for us because it abandoned all kind of physical virtual education, one-to-one. It depended so much on technology, and that's the way to go now. We have to more and more depend on our technology, whether we like it or not. Now we know that human interaction is very important, but human interaction must come as a result of technological updating, technological being on terms with technology. Without that, you cannot move the educational system anywhere further to the front. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Talib, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy
Yes,
Forum.
definitely.
Thank you. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. First, I want to give chance, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Sharif. Excellent forum today on education. I think everybody has highlighted what the problems are, and I think a lot of in those problems, as David Smith has pointed out, there are a lot of solutions, and that we have to act and act as quickly as possible. So that's why we support the World Talent Economy Forum, because of its programs, and we want to be able to bring that to the developing world. A lot of the conversation, other than Dr. Talib has mentioned, is mostly about the U.S. Because of the experience of the people on this forum. My statement is that those are all important issues, and the developing world can learn from what the problems of the U.S. are being framed by David Kelly and everybody else on this forum. However, I think one thing needs to be taken into account. Rwanda is not the United States. India is not the United States. The developing world is not the United States. Cultural differences abound. As Sharif pointed out, a joint venture is being worked through these mosques. Malaysia is a Muslim country, and we have to acknowledge and make sure that we support that cultural aspect of that country. The United States is not a Muslim country, never has been, and not likely will be in the future. So we have to understand that the United States cultural issues are different. So with that in mind, I just want to emphasize that the Sustainability Development Goals play a heavy role in being able to acknowledge the difference in cultural attitudes. And therefore, as Dr. Talib has pointed out, or Professor Talib has pointed out, we need to make efforts. We need to integrate technology into what we're doing today. But we also need to be mindful that not everybody has access to that. As I said before in my statement before, 40% of the country of India is off the grid. It has no electricity. So, excuse me, how are you going to get them on the internet? They have to have power of some kind. That's what we're focusing on. So you need to get sustainability there. You need to get power there. You need to integrate all 17 goals of the Sustainability Development Goals of the UN, which are formulated about a climate crisis that is occurring now. If we don't address that, there'll be no future education. We will all be able to complain about the education in the future, but the education in the future will be almost diminished to zero. So the point is, we need to act now using educational talent, using the World Talent Economy Forum to get out there, get people educated, get fundamental understanding of at least the concept of reading and writing in place, at minimum, because of all the people we're talking about in the United States, a lot of people know how to read and write. Not that they know how to think, as it was pointed out. And there's a difference between common sense thinking and what we call linear thinking, which is A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. And that's the way most people think. And I think what David Kelly was talking about is we need more lateral thinking. How do you connect Q, Z, and K together? And that can be done. It can be trained. It's been done in the United States. It's being done not as often as it should be, but it can be done. David Smith, I know, is very integral in the concept of bringing this type of thought process to the table, and so is Rob. We need to act now. So my closing statements is support the World Talent Economy Forum with all your efforts. Join, take courses, do whatever you can to make a difference. If you make a difference, the difference will be there for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marshall, for your support for World Talent Economy Forum. Professor Rob, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Well, as we mentioned, the existing education system is broken. Whether you argue that it's got locked into concepts of the past or too focused on degrees and not focused enough on creating a real life for the students, the end result is it's hard to point at an existing university or even a trade school that does a great job providing the breadth of skills you're going to need in your future life. And that means the responsibility resides with you, and to a certain extent, your parents. So if you are a parent, you have to recognize the responsibility to assure your child comes into their life with a full set of skills. And that means not only an understanding of what it is they do well and enjoy, and as well as an understanding of what they do poorly and don't enjoy. The first years up until you're about 20 should be largely about self-discovery and recognizing that until you reach 30, your ability to make full determinations on things like consequences are limited. Your brain isn't fully formed, and so the kinds of mistakes I think all of us who are older made, we made a whole crap ton of them before we were 30. And for parents, understanding how to keep your kids from making a life destroying mistake during that time, and as students and kids growing into young adults, understanding what those risks are and avoiding them can help you have a long-term life. And certainly recognizing certain things, like whether or not you want a family because you appreciate the commitment of raising the children, or you want a family because your friends have a family and it's a status symbol. One is beneficial to society and will be useful. The other will result in children that absolutely hate you. So the really thinking through those kinds of decisions that you will have to make in the future now, and understanding the breadth of capabilities that are out there. If there's one thing that you really have to learn, that is to enjoy learning. Because as David Kelly pointed out, in most of the technical fields, skills change a lot over a very short period of time. And if you resist continued education, you will age out of your skill set and really have nothing that you can fall back on to continue on. In my own career choices, what I discovered really early on, in fact, it was kind of funny because at IBM, I'm sure they still do this, but when I was there, you were assigned a mentor, basically somebody that was supposed to help you with regard to your career and guide you in your choices. And my third mentor sat me down and said, Rob, you're never going to advance unless you specialize. And let's be clear, I thought I knew enough at that particular point in time to know that she was full of crap. That the folks that specialized, to a large extent, I was watching get laid off because their specialty had expired. And so I came to the conclusion what you need to do is you need to generalize, and that allows you to move from career to career, move from task to task, move from job to job as the industry moves, because you can then react and actually be proactive in terms of moving on opportunities before everybody else sees them. Otherwise, you're kind of a slave to what's going on with management, what's going on with industry, and you don't have control over your own life. I also discovered early on that I just was never going to be a great parent, and so I didn't make the mistake of having kids. It wasn't something that I was going to excel at. And so I decided early on that wasn't going to be something that I was going to do. I was good at other things, and by understanding those things I was good at, those things that I enjoyed fairly early on in life, I was able to structure a career that now towards the end of that career, I'm very happy with. Where if I'd done similar things to what my parents or grandparents had done, I probably would have ended up very poorly. Now, I'll add one more thing, and that is one of the unfortunate aspects of the world we live in is this feeling that you need to be a CEO, you need to acquire wealth, you need to stand above all others. And I've known a lot of CEOs over the years. I've been related to a number of them, and the vast majority of them at the end of their life are incredibly regretful. They're regretful that they didn't foster family relationships. They're regretful that the things that they valued were no longer valued when they retired. And I remember talking to one of the wealthiest guys in Silicon Valley, an incredible powerhouse, and he lamented about the fact that he hadn't treated any of his wives well, been married multiple times. At the end of his life, his kids hated him. He was single and didn't want to be, and his coworkers and the other people that are around him only were around him to participate in his wealth. They really didn't care for anything that he had to say. And he was literally that guy in the corner office that was looking back at his life. He died a few years later. That was looking back at his life as if he'd wasted it. Yet he was one of the most powerful and wealthiest people in Silicon Valley. So set your goals early. Decide what it is that you want to look back at your life as having done. You want to look back at your life as having raised your children, having them been successful, or you want to look back at your life as a group of missed opportunities and missed engagements. And I go back once again to that friend's father I mentioned earlier, who just seemed to be able to find a way to be happy, whether he was rich or whether he was poor, and recognize that it was family, it was community, it was doing something that was meaningful, that really made the life difference. It wasn't having a whole lot of wealth. In fact, in many cases, when you have a lot of wealth and a lot of things, your life is all tied up in managing that wealth and those things. You don't have time for the other stuff that you really enjoyed. And thinking back of that wealthy guy in Silicon Valley, he had this great sailing boat. I mean, just awesome sailing boat, black, incredibly expensive, and yet he didn't enjoy a moment of it. He had to manage the people that managed the boat. He had to do it. People that enjoyed the boat were his friends that got to go on it and didn't have to deal with all the expenses and headaches. Understanding that is so very critical. The one final thing I'll leave you with is, as I've started off working at Disney, it was my first job for a large corporation, and I dropped out of school. I was going to work at Disney, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I worked 2 shifts. I'd work 1 shift paid, and I'd come back and work another shift unpaid because I just was enjoying the hell out of it. And then Disney came through. They went through a management change, and they fired every single manager that didn't have a degree. And I 2 weeks later, I walked off the job. This was a job I loved. 2 weeks later, I walked off the job, went back to school with a mission. Now I understood how I was going to apply the degrees I was later to get, and I later got 3 of them. But each of them focused in a progression on the things that I really enjoyed. And because I knew I was working towards something that I thought I was going to enjoy, I did so much better in school because I had a practical understanding of how I was going to apply the stuff that I learned. And I retained a ton of it. Where a lot of people that go through school a couple of years later, they don't retain any of it. They got the grades, but it was all about accomplishing the score, not building a better life. And maybe it was by accident I made those decisions. But looking back, they were prescient because they created the life I have now. And I'm happy. I have as much stuff as I need. I have as much income as I need. And for the most part, I'm extremely proud of what I've accomplished. And I wish that for all of you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Rob. Professor David Smith, what do you want to add as a concluding remarks?
Wow. I almost could just add ditto, because there's been so much wisdom given in today's program. Education's necessary, and there's multiple ways to receive education. I, like Rob, have had great mentors, and I purposely try to mentor others as I go. And I actually have a couple of ways I try to mentor. I do traditional mentoring, and I also do what I call flash mentoring, where people can text me a question and I can answer. I love to sit down. What David Kelly referred to earlier in the comments was I tend to lecture at university and colleges, so I am purposely not a faculty. I've seen in this week several of the professors where I will go and lecture in their course once a semester or every year or two, and they always say, "You can say things I can't say." Just like David expressed his frustration with having a normalized curriculum, which I think is out of place with today's fast-moving environment. I don't know of any curriculum councils who can keep up with the curriculum anymore, particularly in technology areas and in global situations and in management. Also, you begin to see how it can be applied. I'm working on a project now with a team that wants to do a leverage buyout of a traditional company. The two sides are fighting internally, and kind of it's going to make it easier to acquire them. But they're fighting so old school, it's just making it easier for us to raise the billions of dollars we need to do the acquisition, the leverage buyout. And it's because they're not keeping up with today's environment. Everything they say goes live across all of the internet. And that's not a good way to understand if you're not educated in how to use it. But my real approach is that we need to understand the concept that we have to continually refresh our skills, refresh our knowledge. We need to put in place a current awareness approach that will, for us, go out and help find resources to help keep us informed. I have programs that I've written that will go out and pull information back in the places I have strong focus areas. I have a bot that will go out and pull quantum computing articles. I have bots which will go pull out others that are of deep interest to me. And oftentimes we need to look at how we even access the information. The amount of disinformation out is still great, and we need to understand how to understand what is real information and what is disinformation, even when we look at quality education. And politics are increasingly getting into quality education, and I think that's a mistake. And we need to look at how to take that out of them. But this is an area where it's not a local issue. It's not a regional issue. It's not a country issue. It really is a global issue because what we do today, what we learn today has a global impact. And the information we are learning is a global set of knowledge and a global set of capabilities. I mean, you basically have to go from the information you're learning and take that into knowledge. And as you begin to get your body of knowledge, you have to turn that into wisdom. And that is the things that, like what Rob referred to as what he learned from his mentors and everything. It's the wisdom that you want to take from it, that you want to be able to have the data, the information, and turn it into knowledge and wisdom. And that is the quality portion of quality education. It's being able to turn it into wisdom. And once you have wisdom, you can take action, which has an impact. The goal of education is to do something with it, to turn it into knowledge and turn it into action. So, Sharif, that's my strong close of what we have to do with quality education.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Professor David Carey, what do you want to add for today's discussion as a concluding remarks?
I think one comment that probably will bother some people that I'd like to make is I think besides the cultural issue with just the modern era and the way the like the smartphone and other sort of trends are affecting the younger generation. Um, the other issue is I really that I think is religious is I also think that people need to step away from religion a little bit. It serves. My problem is when people are too focused on that being a fact, that they're not thinking through facts right. If you can't analyze a situation and understand that there's no evidence for something that you're saying, then do you really have the thinking skills I need in software engineering? It's to each his own, but I find that people that are unable to think through that do not have the cold, raw horsepower I need that's free of bias to be able to solve the more advanced problems. They're too, their religious culture hampers their thinking. And I think that is a problem that in the modern era I would think should be less, and it's not any particular religion. It's more how hardcore they are, whether it's Christian or Muslim or Zoroastrianism, whatever. It just, evidence-based thinking I think is important.
Yeah, very good point, Professor David J. Kelly. But one thing just I want to add, like personally, I visited many places, even the first world universities, to developing nations, school, college, grassroots level things, even madrasa. Fact is, people. Example, we can do debate. This place is good. This place is bad. Example, I am Bangladeshi. I go to Oxford. I go to visited Cambridge. I learn, and I come back to my
Sure.
countries and I try to implement the modern learning, what I learned from Cambridge, and I
Okay.
implement it. Even though personally I take classes in the madrasa, I take. So religious organizations. Fact is that there is two way. One way, I can do debate. I can say that okay, you have lot of problem. This. Your education is not modern. I will not go with you. And another things, I have a chance. I can okay, give me the chance. I can engage with you, and I can help you to learn the beauty of science. Okay,
Okay.
and they learn it. People learn it.
No,
People are positive.
there's
Yeah, and
no reason
yeah,
they can't. And
even
I don't even
yeah.
have an issue with religion as such.
Mhm.
It's if you actually believe it too much, I think is the where you have a problem
Mhm.
with analyzing things. And
Yeah, yeah,
a lot of people, they've just grew up around it. It's part of the culture, not part of who they are. It's when it's part of who they are that
yeah,
it becomes, more of an issue. But if it's just part of the culture and they're like, oh, this is
yeah,
cool, well,
yeah,
I
yeah,
certainly find it interesting. I would
yeah,
love some of this supernatural stuff to be true. That would totally be cool. Whip out your magic wand and do some. Hey, that would solve a lot of my problems.
yeah.
But
Actually, let's say even I read Quran. There is no too much of supernatural things. Everything is practical life. Everything because I do not go like it's a different language. I try to learn that what's going on, what is the fact, what I'm actually getting. So even we have a very interesting episode. If you have time, you can check religion and technology. I believe that many famous scientists and professors from Singapore, from Malaysia, and from Indonesia. They join religion and technology. This episode is very, very interesting, and I believe the modern scientists, they have religious view, but they believe in science, modern science, engineering, and technology, and we have to engage with people. My fact is that yes, there are maybe many negative things, and we can engage. Yeah, I know religion has many wrong things. I agree with you. I agree with you. But my job, I have to engage with them, and I can change themselves. And I find, trust me, there are many talented people. Many talented
Oh,
people.
yeah,
I
no doubt.
train madrasa students, and they become national champion. Okay,
Okay.
Sharif, I'd like to just add something to support your theme here. I understand where David Professor Kelly is coming from, but like you, I've been around the world and worked in different cultures. I've worked in the Middle East. I've worked in Asia. I've worked in South America, and I think commingling, as you pointed out, commingling religion and education. Well, there's different types of education. There is religious education. You can go to madrasa, or you can go to a religious institution in a Catholic setting, for example, and get a religious education. But that's not to be confused with the educational topics that we're talking about today, and the ones that they're talking about, the quality education that is highlighted in the Sustainable Development Goals by the UN. They came out with these definitions of the Sustainable Development Goals for education, not based on religion or anything like that. It's based upon what I think Professor Kelly's talking about, a framework of understanding facts. What is fact? What's fiction? The problem that we have today, I think Dr. Kelly or Professor Kelly's coming upon, and that he's trying to express, and I don't mean to express his opinion, but this is what I understand him to be saying, is that you can't commingle fanaticism as opposed to religion. There are many fanatics in all kinds of religions, and we have to take that out of the equation and look at the facts. If you're going to teach somebody algebra, they have to know that 2 + 2 does not equal 3. It just doesn't. If you want to believe that, well, that could be a political statement. We've seen that in the United States with that kind of thinking with the previous president of the United States, not the current one, and he pulled us out of the climate accord, all because of political understanding. I think what we're seeing right now in Europe with the conflict there is we're thinking that is 2 + 2 = 3. It's that kind of logic. That has nothing to do with culture. That has nothing to do with the Russian culture. Has nothing to do with the history of Russians towards Ukrainians or vice versa. But it has to do with what I would call a personality problem, a personality disorder. It's a psychological problem. So, and there is a discipline in education for psychology. I have a degree in clinical psychology. I can tell you right now that that can be applied to solve some of the problems in the world. But at the same time, to support what you're saying, Sharif, cultural issues do have to be taken into context when you're bringing solutions, especially to Malaysia or especially to those 3,000 mosques that support the World Talent Economy Forum, and we want to work together with them. We want to solve problems at a human level. And I think what Professor Kelly is talking about, he's actually on the same page with us. And the reason that he might consider it to be a dissonance for the people on this panel or other people out there watching this is because of his perception of the religions that have been out there that have done not religions, but people who claim in the name of religion that they're doing something when they're not. They're actually doing a disservice to the religion. So I'm here to support the World Talent Economy Forum, to support the cultural differences, to understand that we need to put ourselves in other people's shoes. That psychologically is the major tool. If we put ourselves in the other person's shoes, even though I'm not Muslim, I'm from a different religion. If I put myself in their shoes, and I have read the Quran, and I do understand Arabic, and I do understand the value of that language and what it brings to the table. We need to understand that people need to put themselves in other people's shoes. Once they do that, then we cross divide, we cross boundaries. So I just wanted to say, I think we're all on the same page, and I hope that everybody out there watching this will put themselves in David J. Kelly's shoes, in
Exactly.
Talib Rafil's shoes, in my shoes, your shoes, so they understand we're all different people. That's the beauty of this planet. The question is, we're different. We're not trying to make everybody alike. And I think that was the previous speakers were complaining about the educational programs that try to make everybody fit into the same shoe. Not everybody has the same foot. They don't go into the same size shoe or the same shape of foot. So it's the same thing like physical things. We need to take that into account. I have to leave. I have another appointment I got to go to, but I want to thank everybody in this forum and bless you all. And we'll talk
Thank
later.
you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Dr.
Marshall. Thank you.
Dr.
So
Talib, what's your... Yes.
I agree with what Marshall was saying there. I think fanaticism is a big part of the problem I have with religion in education. I think one example just is, so I was teaching at BYU, for example, which is a religious college. And another thing that I got in a fight with them constantly is they wanted me to use religion to teach data science. And I frankly, it has no place in data science.
Oh.
You know, using scripture references to teach database theory is like smoking crack and trying to drive, as far as I'm concerned. It's
Yes.
it just, like, if they insist on that, you know, I'm out. Just like, that's a hard no. I don't care. It's not like they pay enough to make teaching worthwhile. And I guess that's another problem with education is we get a bunch of crap teachers in a lot of cases, because if they were any good at their field, they would, at least as software engineers, they certainly wouldn't be working for a university, because at least not if they're interested in money. You know, if the motivation is helping the next generation, maybe, but I struggle with hiring professors because they usually are kind of clueless or outdated, or their skill set's too narrow or something like that. It's, you know, in my field, people at my level are at least making something approaching $250,000, if at least in America and Western Europe. But you know, a teacher, if they're making 70,000, they're doing really well.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
that's
Dr.
another
Talib,
problem with education, actually.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly. Dr. Talib, yes.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me now? You
Yes.
can hear me. Good. I am a Muslim. I was brought up in a Muslim family. I live in a Muslim country that speaks Arabic in Jordan. But I have one problem with what David said. What David said is he has no issues with religion. I have issues with religion. I do, David. I think you're absolutely right. But the problem is not religion per se. Religion came at a period in time in history to correct man's path into going into the unknown. And we have exhausted that part, I think. Now, there are two sets of values, like, you know, Professor, I think it's David that said, the other David Smith, that said something about wisdom. No, wisdom, family, and other values are eternal values. They don't change. What changes, and humanity doesn't change, shouldn't change. But what changes is the other aspect of life, which we're trying to teach to people. Religion changes also. Each religion has been developing in a different way. Now, as a Muslim myself, I would say that I'm not very proud of the way the Muslims today are running their affairs. But I can't accept the fact that we're discriminated against simply because we're Muslims. So this is a tool of discrimination, David. It's not just a tool of denying the logic of the mind. It's a tool of dividing people in this world based on religion. And every religion in the world passed through that. Christianity during the times of the Inquisition, for example, was a good example of how people were trying to impose their religion on somebody else by force and killing people for that. You can't simply accuse the Muslims of doing this alone. Now, having said this, I want to say that education is about change. It has to change. But some values have to be consistent. Humanity values, like the values that are embedded in the 17 development goals, sustainable development goals. They're values that must be maintained. Values of humanity, values of equality, which are existing in almost every religion. The essence of every religion is about humanity, really. So if we go back to the basics of the religions, we won't find ourselves in a conflict like the one that David finds himself with, as I find myself with as well. I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Sharif.
Professor Dr. Talib, for joining today's session, and Dr. David J. Kelly for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Today's session actually excellent. We bring different views on educations, especially what actually technology industry want. We can learn from today's discussions, as well as we learn that why values is important in educations, as well as how we can change the educational strategy. That is also important. Tomorrow we have a debate, special debate. Naturally, Friday we arrange the debate. Our debate topic: this house believe that technology making people more productive. So, honorable speakers and the audience, you can join in our debate. I'm sure many of our audience really like our debate session, and hopefully through different open dialogue, debate, and different kind of research, and many more things we can change. And one thing, World Talent Economy Forums, not only example in Malaysia, we are working with Muslim community. In India, we are working with Hindu communities. In other
Yes.
countries, our most of the people's, example, even speakers, they are from different religious point of view. We do not have any like things about religions. We only want to engage with people, and our view is that we want to engage with as much possible with the people. So I know there are many talent in the grassroots level people, and we cannot ignore them. We have to engage with them. We have to help them, and that's why even I can say that many guardian, they come to World Talent Economy Forums and they said, hey, I want to be like my son, like to be like Dr. Talib. My son like to be Professor David J. Kelly or Mr. Rob or David Smith. That is our achievement. Now we set the standard. Your open dialogue set the standard for the developing nations, and we can change. So we do not see who from which background. We are providing support to India. We are providing support to Pakistan, Malaysia, even Africa, Rwanda. This is true. We cannot discriminate. I agree with
Yeah.
Dr. Talib. We cannot discriminate. We have to engage with people. We have to understand different cultures. That's why I always
Yes.
say we go to developed world for learning. So even you should come to developing worlds. Even many of my friends from Cambridge University and Oxford University, I help them to exchange program, and they come. They go to Bangladesh and learn Grameen Bank, microfinance.
I've been to
Excellent,
I've taught classes in India
excellent.
and the Philippines. Um,
That's
it,
good,
it's
David.
it's not
It's very
it's
good.
not religion really. I think it is fanaticism and using religion as an excuse for illogical thinking. That's really my
That's right.
issue. And like with BYU Idaho, where I was teaching, oh my gosh, they're so radical about it that it gives me a headache.
Yeah, I
Um,
know.
if you go to
I
the
know. I know
provost,
exactly what you're talking about. I
yeah,
know
it
exactly
just
what you're talking.
it isn't necessarily I was raised religious, but it logical thinking and religion are two separate things. You don't. But I do think cultural understanding is really important
core of
for
all of this.
many other reasons. And
That's right.
I don't know how to say your name, but the values that religion can teach under the right conditions, I think is invaluable. I haven't seen
That's
a structure for teaching, basic human values better than religion, irregardless of whether it's Islam or Christianity or whatever.
That's right.
You know,
You're absolutely right, Professor. You're absolutely right, Professor. I was a Muslim. I was raised as a Muslim, but I was brought up in a Catholic school in Terra Santa, the Franciscan school. And I learned how to appreciate all the values that are embodied in these religions. One day, my teachers at the university, at the school in Jordan, which is Terra Santa School. Terra Santa is the Holy Land school. They used to wake us up every morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, make us take a cold shower and go down to the chapel to pray. Whether we're Christians or not, we had to pray. So a little boy came and told me, you don't have to do this. You can tell them you're a Muslim. When my father came from traveling, I told him, do I really have to do this? He said, what are you doing? I said, this is what I'm doing every morning. He said, you shut up, you go, you pray. It's the same God we're praying for. It's the same values we're all dedicated for. Unfortunately, religion nowadays, people that are in charge of religion have divided us and have made us all look at each other with suspicion and prejudice. That's my problem with religion now. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you,
David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David J.
Thank you,
Kelly,
both of
and
you.
thank you, Dr. Talib. It's really great discussion. Really great.
Thank you.
Even
Thank you.
tomorrow we have debate. If you want to join tomorrow's sessions, we can arrange the open debate. So thank you for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.
Take care. Bye.
Hey guys.
Thank you.
Murph,
Bye.
over
Bye.
there.
Bye, David. Bye, David.
Bye.
Bye.